Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Benny Voncken, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. And I shared with you before we hit record, I had a little bit of a tough time sleeping last night because I'm a little fired up about this. So I'm super excited for our time together. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go all the way up to today. And then we want to talk about the amazing things you're doing with your coaching program. And we also want to talk about your podcast too, because you're using that to reach out to people. And I really feel like you're making some headway, right? You're having an impact on people's lives. And I think that is really, really cool. So thanks again for being here.
Yeah, and thank you for having me on. And I'm looking forward to, sharing that message as well and my story, because I think they're both connected. So I think that's a great way to start.
That's awesome, buddy. So where were you born?
I'm from the Netherlands, a tiny, tiny village in the south of the Netherlands. It's such a small country. You can cross it in like 2 hours north to south and an hour and a half east to west. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it's very small. But
yeah, it's really
still,
small.
I grew up in an even smaller town. And so I, grew up from there. And I kind of, I don't know, because it was such a small town, and maybe because I felt like I was so limited, because it's not very common in the Netherlands to have a driving license as early as, for example, in the States. I only got it when I was 25. And when I moved to Spain, it's quite expensive in the Netherlands. So I had to do everything by bike, and you're limited. And I think that's where kind of, as I progressed in the story, my traveling interest came from, because I wanted to explore and wanted to break those barriers of being kind of inclusive in that community. But I had a great time growing up, going into the forest, just exploring everything that I could and using my imagination to just, think of things and just enjoy life.
Yeah.
And that's where I went on to college and study tourism. And my story is a little bit of mismatch of everything. I worked in restaurants as I was in college, and then I studied tourism. The crisis hit, and this is also that kind of tale where you just have to build, go with the punches, right, and just adapt to changes. And later on, as we talk about Stoicism, it also showed me more of how adapting to life can really lead to a good life. So I went from tourism. And then someone I met on a night out said, like, why don't you go to Spain to teach English? I was like, okay, that sounds like fun. So I, I gave up my apartment and everything, and I just moved to Spain. Like 2.5 weeks later, I was in Spain and teaching English. So that's kind of where my real traveling. I had some traveling experience before that, but that's where I really just immigrated to Spain, and without even speaking the language, I just went and sold everything and just figured out, like, hey, that sounds like a good way to do something different.
I love it. That's really cool. So somebody just mentioned it to you and you thought, that's a great idea.
Yeah, sometimes you got to go with that instinct.
Yeah.
Sometimes when someone tells you something, and obviously you think about it a little bit, you talk to people about it, but once you really feel that it's something that feels good, at least I try to listen as much as I can to my intuition, to that inner voice. And when it feels good, usually I just go. And then you can still make a mistake. You can still realize that after you do that, you see, like, this isn't really what I thought it would be, and maybe I'm not as good at this, and I can change and pivot towards something else. But I feel like more people should listen to that inner voice and follow their passions and what they really feel that they should be doing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In fact, that's what we're doing. We're literally in the middle of me living my passion, right? So, and I know we are yours too. So, let's, if it's okay, can we back up for just a second?
Yeah, of course.
So I know you mentioned playing outdoors, playing in the forest and that kind of thing. Was that your favorite thing about growing up in the Netherlands?
Yeah, and just, go riding bikes. We were raised very independent. So my parents, they were both working, and they just, primary school was like maybe, I don't know in miles, about 3.5 kilometers from home. We, at the age of 8, my parents was like, here's your bike, go to school, we have to work. And then afterwards we had to ride like 10 kilometers. Again, I don't know what that is in miles, we have to look that up, but it's like maybe half an hour cycling. And it was like through all weather conditions, wind, rain, snow, ice, everything. The
You
amount of
get it
times
all
that
in
I drove,
Netherlands, right?
all of it, and then the amount of times that I fell off my bicycle, that's, can't even, like can't even count it, because it was just too slippery and everything. But this is something that you had to do. There wasn't any other option. We had to go to school, and my parents weren't there to bring us, because they were trying to, keep us afloat and everything. They were doing their hardest, and we had to put in our effort as well. And so I think that for me, that was, besides the opportunity to just be out there and play and feel safe in a nice environment. All of my family lived close, so we were all just kind of this nice community together. That was such a great experience. And on top of that, my parents just always reminded us, like, you've got to do what you feel like you should be doing, just to make you happy. And whatever they did, they supported us. And that's something that nowadays not a lot of, and maybe back then, not a lot of people get, right, from the parents. They say, do whatever you think you should be doing, and we will support you if it's within reason, right? If it's if it's a good thing.
That's cool. So is there a name of the city where you were born and raised?
It's a very tiny, it's called Sibbe, but it's close to Maastricht, which is actually quite has a lot of Roman roots in it. So it's
Gotcha.
a very beautiful city. It's like close to Brussels. Most people know Amsterdam in the Netherlands, but for me, like, Brussels in Belgium is far closer than Amsterdam. So if
Gotcha.
I were to book a flight, I would usually fly either somewhere in Belgium or even Germany. We're right in the middle of those two countries.
Gotcha. So was there a really small town where you grew up?
Yeah, we had like 1,500 people living there.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
tiny. Everybody knew everybody.
Yeah, we didn't even have a bus. We had one store when I grew up, but that's gone. We would go to the train. You'd have to walk like 45 minutes to an hour, and the bus would come maybe once every 2 hours. So you had to do everything. If you didn't have a car, you had to do everything on bike.
Yeah. Wow, that's wild.
Yeah.
So growing up in this tiny community, where did you go to high school?
I went to Maastricht, so that was a city outside of, like, that. Again, that was just by maybe 30 minutes. When we, as I grew older and got really faster, I think my record was like 20 minutes, something like that. We just racing.
If you were late, right?
Yeah. If I were late, then I had to go quick. But even with my buddies, we would just do racing. We just meet up somewhere and just go race as quickly as we could. But no, that was in the bigger city. And again, that was a shock for me for coming from a little town. You go to the bigger city and you have all these other people from different backgrounds, and we weren't that well off. We didn't have too much money, so we had to had the hand-me-down clothes, and then in that city there were a lot of rich people, so they would look down on you, and you get some funny comments or faces. But that's something you just have to deal with, and I think that's also what showed me that there's something more. There's always something more you can explore, and there's always something more you can see and learn, and that's where I started to expand my world, really.
That's cool. So in high school, did you have a favorite subject?
Oof, I wasn't very good in high school, and there's a long story with like the grades, but I was just by 0.4 out of my marks. I just got to the lowest grade, and I was just too easy. So I was just kind of freewheeling to everything, and then I passed all the other stuff. It kind of turned out all right. But as a student, I wasn't very, very good. But I did like, PE was like sports was always a big thing in me. So that was good. But I also like the sciences and history. There's always something there with the history. If I really have to look at it, I'm just curious. So if someone gives me a topic, I like to explore more. And that's something that's been just a pivotal and central point in my life.
That's cool. So did you have a favorite sport in high school?
We have what you call soccer, football. That's my sport. Like in the Netherlands, I played it from when I was 4 until I was 34-ish. That's when I had a bad injury, and now it's just even running is difficult. But that's what we played like from when we were young, and I always played it all my life. I loved it. But any sports, I like just sports in general.
What was your favorite thing about soccer? Playing it. What was your favorite thing about playing soccer?
For me, I was always a defender. So technically, I'm not the best person, but I'm a hard worker. So
Yeah.
my main task was the coaches, most of the coaches just told me like, this is the striker. He scores most goals. He's their best man. So you're on him. If he goes to the toilet, you follow him. That's what they would tell me. And I would just be on him, take the ball, and just pass it to someone else. And as you progress and start to get old and read the game a little bit more, I got a more central role and we're able to pass the ball around a little bit more. But I love that, to be a valuable part of a team and to really make an impact. And I didn't have to score. I never really scored a lot of goals. I think I maybe scored 3 or 4 goals in my entire years that I played. But just the fact that you're valuable to a person, to a team, just by working hard, doing your best, doing what you need to do and focusing on that, that was I think one of the things that I loved best about soccer. But then again, you can apply that to any sport, and I think sometimes people forget that, right? They want to do so much more. Well, if you focus on what you're really good at, you can excel in so many more things.
Yeah, and you can have an impact, right?
Yeah.
So defense wins championships, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There you go. So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
For me, that would probably be my father. Just looking at how he did his work and how he always applied himself to the utmost, capability of what he could do. He was always very kind. He worked for the government, the upkeep of the roads, servicing and all that stuff. So he was like, for example, in the winter, we wouldn't see him as much in the evenings because he would be out there maintaining the roads, putting on the salt and everything, whatever they used to make sure that it was open for everybody to, accessible. But you could see how he did everything with passion, and he knew, like, because he was so much, he's still with us. Fortunately, that's one of the things to have. But he knows so much about nature and plants. If you go on a walk with him, he would tell you, oh, this is this plant, this is this tree, and that's just something. He's really present. He really sees life around. And then, my mom, obviously, as well, she's a little bit more stern, but she also taught us values and all the important things that you have to have as a good human being and to keep us straight together. So just them two working together and trying to raise a family of 4, that's just inspiring. And it shows you that you can, once you put your mind to it and you really work together, and you can achieve so much more. And, if I think my life and how me and my sisters live is a great example of how well they raised us and did their job as parents.
Yeah. So what's the most important thing in your mind that you learned from your father?
I think being calm and just looking at things, not overreacting too quick, and just looking at the situation for what it is and acting, just doing the thing that is needed, necessary, thinking about it, because the great thing is, like, I used to work with him in the garden a lot, and I still do when I'm in the Netherlands. And I love the talks, just planning, just looking at what needs to be done. And a lot of people, they kind of jump in, which I tend to do as well. But it's good to kind of observe things, to take a step back. And that's something that I've really learned from him. And something, I think a lot of people, they forget to listen. When I'm at work, and in some of the offices, you hear people give instructions or they tell people how to do it. And then later they just, my colleagues wouldn't have a clue how to do it. But I try to listen as best as I could, and that already puts you a step ahead of the rest. So for me, that was one of the major lessons that I've just learned: to observe life, to see what's going on, and make sure that you apply, yourself and all the tools that you have in the right way.
Well, you're sort of built that way. You mentioned earlier that one of the things in school that you discovered about yourself growing up was you just were curious.
Yeah.
Right? And being curious is, I believe, one of the bedrocks of human communication and understanding, right? Staying out of judgment and staying in curiosity, I believe, is a big, big deal. And it's sort of this running theme of that we're having in this podcast. You're episode 266. Okay. We've been doing this less than a year and a half. We're in 58 countries, by the way, worldwide. And one of the things that we found is everybody that succeeds at a high level has a way of staying curious. They have a way of asking questions. They have a way of listening to somebody talking to them and then asking them a question about what they just said, right? And digging and getting deeper about not just staying at the surface. So Yeah, that's really important, especially as a coach. I mean, I know we're going to get into this, but my goodness, it's invaluable. Okay, so after high school, where do you go?
That was an interesting time. As I said, I was put into the lowest, so you have three levels. And with the highest, you can go to college directly, but with mine, you would probably go to like a trade school. So
Okay.
then I went to like adult school and I did the next level in 1 year. So I have a twin sister, and my twin sister wasn't at second level, and then we finished, at the same time anyway. So that was nice. And
Hmm.
then I was kind of a bit lost where I didn't know what to do. So I took some more grades and I worked in a restaurant as a cook, and I helped to
Hmm.
renovate a house. So I was just doing things to kind of see what I wanted to do. But
Hmm.
I ended up going to study, to the college and study tourism management, which I figured was a nice way to travel and to learn a
Hmm.
little bit more about marketing and all those other things that are, yeah, still, again, I like everything, but those aspects of it were really interesting.
Yeah.
But and I finished that in a little bit over 4 years, so 6.5 years. It was a 4 year study. As I said, studying wasn't my main focus when I
Hmm.
was younger, but I was in in student unions, in the board of those the student unions, so all preparing, planning events, all those things, and in my football team, the captain, and so there's a lot of extra responsibilities came up, and at one point I said, okay, let's shut it all off. Let's focus on my studies, which I
Hmm.
finished. Unfortunately, in 2009, so that was when the crisis hit,
Yeah,
tourism is one of the first ones to go down,
it's
and
true.
that's where I ended up going to Spain.
Okay. So you're in Netherlands, you've
Yeah,
studied tourism management,
yeah,
and you've graduated, right? And
yeah,
it's 2009, and basically tourism is in the tank, right?
yeah.
And then you end up, you said, going to a party or going somewhere, and somebody says, "Hey, you should go to Spain." Will you talk about that experience for a second? What was it? Was it a dinner party or something?
It was a very curious event. My One of my best friends was opening a shop for a clothing brand that he was working for. So
Okay.
this was an opening party, and it wasn't really busy. But then my twin sister and her best friend joined, and her friend had two friends from Spain who were there just by coincidence. We
Hmm.
started talking, and one of the two was actually an English teacher in Spain. We ended up talking. I never met these people before, and so she's like, your English is very good, so why don't you go to Spain? And the interesting thing is Spain was hit very bad during
Yeah,
this crisis. Spain, Greece, Italy, a lot of the southern European countries.
it's
and then
true.
if and while everybody was going out of Spain, I was going into Spain because there was a mandatory a law that made it mandatory for students, for anyone, to have a certain level of English before they
Hmm.
could actually get the degree. They had to get a B1. So you have A1, A2, and B1 level of English before you could actually get your degree. It didn't matter what kind of study or
Wow.
or thing you were doing. So there was so many opportunities for English teachers. That's what made it a little bit more easy for me to go to Spain and teach English. I did a 4 week course. I did 4 weeks of Spanish, and then I just went to all the language schools. I just went there and gave my resume, and I just sat there for a few hours there and there, because getting your foot in and getting started is difficult, especially as a non-native English speaker.
Hmm.
It's more difficult. But at one point, a teacher was sick, and I was sitting there. And I was like, "Hey, you can teach, right?" And I was like, "Yep." And I just went into class, and that's how I got started with my teaching experience. And from there, it
Wow.
built up, and eventually moved from Spain, different places. I opened my own language school.
Wow.
That only took for a year, but because of my partner, and we had a few disagreements, and I got an offer to go to Dubai. So I went to
Hmm.
Dubai for about 5 years. Um, so it just all of that, from that split decision of following your intuition,
Yeah.
knowing what feels right, the rest of it kind of follows.
So where in Spain did you go?
I started in Granada, so all the
Okay.
way down the south in Andalusia. I lived for 4 years in Granada. Then I moved to Malaga, and after that to Cadiz. So pretty much all in the south.
Okay. Why did you choose Granada?
Because the friend of that, my sister's friend, she lived in Granada, and she
Oh.
said it was a great city. And I googled the TEFL courses, and
Hmm.
there was one available. So figured, why
Awesome.
not just start there?
Wow. Awesome. So what was your
Yeah.
favorite thing about your time in Spain?
Now looking back at it, is learning Spanish. My
Hmm.
Spanish is quite fluent, and of last two years, I've been traveling around South America and do those countries, and just being able to speak that language has added so much to my life, and knowing the culture and all of that has just given me such a profound knowledge of how the world works, and also that people all over the place, all over the world, just want one thing: they have a peaceful life for themselves and for the people. But just, I think the main thing that I've learned there is that I can thrive, I can live anywhere.
Yeah.
That as long as you are open-minded, again, that as you mentioned before, that curiosity, but as long as you are welcoming and social and apply yourself, you can make it anywhere you are.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. So you made a decision, you mentioned it a second ago, you made a decision to leave Spain and go to Dubai. Talk about that for a second. How did you find out about that opportunity, and what was it that sort of propelled you to do that?
As I said before, that last year before I left to Dubai, I started my own language school. I was working in a big school. There was a great opportunity there to start a language school. There was no overhead. We had, the 700 students available for us, but my partner wanted something more. She wanted to add an office here, add there. And I was the only teacher. I was stretched way too thin. And at the beginning, we didn't make a lot of money. And curiously enough, I hired a teacher. And to be honest, I still have a lot of things to learn when it comes about hiring people. That's why it's great to have business partners who have each their skills. He wasn't the best teacher, I'll be honest, but he came up to me, and this was when I was together with my ex. We're divorced at the moment, or now. But he told us, why don't you go to China or Dubai? There's so many opportunities for two English teachers, because my ex was an English teacher as well. So many opportunities. Why don't you go there? And I've thought about it before, but again, as a non-native English speaker, it's far more difficult to get hired in those places. At that time, we already got a master's degree from the University of Malaga in teaching English as a foreign language, so that really helped.
That's cool.
And I saw, like a job fair, an English teaching job fair in Manchester. I wrote to the lady just out of the blue. It's like, hey, is this something for us? Here's our resumes. Can we go and work there? And she was like, no, not really on this job fair, but there is an interesting program from the Ministry of Education in Dubai to which you can apply. So we did. And the great thing about, we had a great partnership as my ex and I. And so we applied together, and I went to the interview first. I told her the experiences, and then she passed, she got the job, and then we moved to Dubai together, and I did the interview again and got the same job. So that's how we moved to Dubai. Sometimes you need to, working together again, it's a great asset to have.
That's cool. So you get the job, you move to Dubai, and you're there for 5 years, and you're teaching English. Is that right?
At the beginning, yes. I was teaching English in a public school. And that's when we're still together. At that point, our relationship started to break down. So that's where I started to separate. And after a year and a half, I started to live by myself. And then during COVID, I did an interview before that with an assessment team. So I was a teacher there for like 2.5 years. And then after that, I got hired, or I got promoted to writing the exams and the assessments, doing the proofreading, instructing teachers how to do the exams for the Ministry of Education for pretty much all the schools in the UAE. And after that, learning development and support to help the teachers, give teacher training, and to inspect the school. So I worked my way out of the classroom into a more a managerial, academic,
administrative,
position. Administrative,
Okay. So that was after COVID.
Yeah.
Right. So what was COVID like for you out there?
It's personally for me, it was like I can be kind of a recluse. So for me, it was a great moment of introspection. That's where I started focusing. And before that, to be honest, I started focusing on really applying philosophy. But I started doing some coaching courses because I knew I wasn't really. I liked the teaching, the interaction, but I knew that there was something more that I could take out of me to give to people. And I think for me, as we get into the coaching, that's where I really learned that that's where I can really apply myself. As you mentioned, the curiosity is a great aspect of that. So for, the COVID in the UAE, it's a country that's it's very easy and difficult, because we just got a text message saying tomorrow everything's going to go on lockdown. And then you just have to follow the rules and do what you're being told. And there's not a lot of discussion there, because they have two options. It's either you do this or you leave.
Right.
We don't, you don't have to stay here. So I was already on a plan for myself that I set out after me and my ex started a breakup. So I set myself on a financial plan, on a personal plan, with a philosophical but also career plan, and I had these set out, and I needed a few more years. So I figured this is a great way to do it. And for me, COVID was all about working, but studying, learning new skills like building a website, writing a blog. I've never done all these things, and I just taught myself how to do that. And now I'm helping other people building.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.